Believe it or not, there are some YouTubers that even I enjoy watching. But one of them just shared a hot take that is so questionable, not even his own fans are buying it. Throw in the fact that he's responding to someone who's basically known for being questionable, and yeah, I have a few hot takes of my own. Hi, I'm a random person on the internet. You're a random person on the internet. And together, we're here to talk about Penguin Zero and iDubbbz. Now, hear me out, because at first glance, this actually seems kind of convoluted, right? Like, I'm reacting to this huge YouTuber named Penguin Zero, aka Charlie, who just put out 2 videos reacting to this huge YouTuber named iDubbbz, aka Ian, who just put out 1 video apologizing for a series of videos called Content Cop, in which he reacted to a whole bunch of other YouTubers. But don't worry, because I'm gonna break it all down one thing at a time, and by the end, you'll completely understand not just what happened, but why so many people are talking about it. There are over 100,000 comments between those 3 videos, and this literally just happened last week. What seems like a simple creator dispute on the surface actually belies a huge and ongoing debate which affects all of us, with questions like what counts as harmful content, who gets to accept an apology for racism, and scariest of all, what kind of person were you in 2016? And I have opinions about all of it, from the awful Content Cop videos to Ian's overdue apology to Charlie's bizarre reaction to all of this. Now, sometimes I make quick videos like this one where I just go over random things that I want to talk about, and if you wind up liking this one, you should check out my last upload, which is basically just me losing it over one of the dumbest articles I've ever read about notorious fraud Elizabeth Holmes. But besides these quick vids, I'm always working on longer deep dive videos as well. These take quite a bit longer to make, but they're always a ton of fun, like my previous one about internet menace Andrew Tate, or my upcoming one about Twitter's favorite billionaire. Again, those are a much longer watch, but if you have some time to kill, then you're definitely going to enjoy them as well. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the video. As you can see, there is a lot to talk about, so I say what we do here is go back. From 2015 to 2017, the YouTuber iDubbbz uploaded new episodes to his hugely successful commentary YouTube series called Content Cop. iDubbbz, real name Ian, had uploaded all kinds of videos to his channel, but Content Cop was by far the most well-known series, with multiple episodes currently sitting at tens of millions of views each. Since none of the events in this video would have happened without Content Cop, we're going to briefly revisit a few key episodes so we can see exactly what happened here, and we'll start with the one about Keemstar. So like most episodes, this one starts off with Ian acting out some sort of slapstick sketch before switching to some good old-fashioned YouTube commentary, in which he unironically drops the N-word with a hard R less than 15 seconds after sitting down.
We're going to check out a channel that's best known for the phrase.
He then quotes something else using the word once again, and that's not even bleeped, by the way, that's all me. So dropping racial slurs just to prove that the person you're talking about also drops racial slurs is definitely a shaky start, but Ian actually does have some real points in this video.
This dude is the most sensitive man on the planet.
See, Content Cop episodes were almost exclusively made on bad actors on the platform, people who actually did need to be called out. Ian was giving the people what they wanted and making plenty of good points as well, but the problem was for every good point, he had to throw in something like this. That way you never forgot that it was an iDubbbz video.
Even though I have 1,000 videos on the internet of me saying I'm gonna cry over this video.
That was the 3rd one, by the way. So this mishmash of valid criticism with a complete lack of regard for delivery resulted in decent digs like this.
He has no filter, he'll just do it. And this has resulted in countless examples of him saying really regrettable
mixed in with completely terrible things like this.
I've never said this unironically, but I think this will be the first time I actually say it unironically and mean it. Kill yourself.
So yeah, how many views could you get in 2016 YouTube by making a few good but blatantly obvious points, throwing around racial slurs like it's nothing, and then telling the subject of your video to literally kill themselves? Well, 33 million, of course. Look, I know people still complain about commentary YouTube to this day, but dear God, at least it's not like that anymore. Anyway, lest you think I pulled a particularly risque episode of Content Cop, let's take a look at another one. That way you can see that Ian was literally always like this. So this next one was a Content Cop on banned YouTuber Leafy is Here, and it racked up over 30 million views as well.
I'm perfectly fine with bullying. Make fun of someone because they're fat, autistic, or riddled with acne. I don't care. Make fun of them. I think my only stipulation with the bullying is that you also have to not be a pussy.
Once again, this video is rightfully criticizing Leafy for his actions, specifically the way he used his giant platform to bully random children on the internet. But once again, the way Ian went about it was just extremely counterproductive.
This is a picture of Leafy at the little meetup. And there's no filter here. This is him in his natural environment. Unfortunately, a profile shot.
Bullying someone over their physical appearance to prove that you should not bully people over their physical appearance is definitely not the 4D chess move that everyone seemed to think that it was at the time. Nevertheless, Ian persisted, even going so far as to involve random strangers.
Someone disappeared, huh?
No, he's just his chin disappeared.
Oh,
Put the OK sign on the chin, just like that.
Looking back, I would actually say the main point of this video gets kind of lost in the sauce, as Ian seems like he spends more time talking about Leafy's chin than he does talking about actual valid criticisms against him.
This is what a normal human skull looks like. This is what Leafy's skull looks like.
Groundbreaking stuff, really. And YouTube treated it as such too, until they somewhat inevitably deleted the video in 2019 for being a pretty blatant breach of their bullying and harassment guidelines. Just like the Keemstar video, this was a well-deserved call out, but with an absurd execution. Anyway, now that you have a feel for the style of Content Cop, let's look at one final episode before we leave it all in the past where it belongs. This episode is going to come back up later in the video because it's arguably the worst one, and by arguably, I mean definitely.
A couple months ago, Tana Mojo tweeted at me that she was very unhappy with my use of the N-word. I didn't respond to her tweet. Instead, I did a bit of research and I found out that she used the dreaded N-word in the past.
So after playing 2 clips of Tana using the N-word, iDubbbz launches into this tirade about how people are too afraid of using the N-word, hard R and everything.
We are very stupid to hold the word at this colossally high standard, whereas every other slur, that can be used in a comedic sense or an editorial sense, but not this one. Either all of them are okay or none of them are okay.
If that sort of sounds to you like he was suggesting that we use slurs more often, that's not only what he was suggesting, he was just actively encouraging it.
Have you or your friends ever said a word so frequently that it's lost a lot of the initial punch that it had? And eventually it just lost all meaning entirely?
A video in which someone with a large platform goes on a rant about how using slurs is good actually is just already such an L in and of itself, and yet he just couldn't stop.
All of you people out there who hold these words at such high esteem, you are giving it the power that you so desperately want it to not have.
Blaming you people for slurs is not just stupid, it's pretty backwards as well, since the whole idea is that slurs have been historically used against people who wouldn't have had enough power to speak out about how wrong they were in the first place. Besides that, Ian gets mad that Tana called him racist for using the N-word all the time. Like, he seems legitimately offended.
I wouldn't deem her racist because I don't know what's in here or what's in here. But the fascinating part about all of this is that she won't offer me or any of you guys the same level of respect.
I don't need to know your innermost feelings to know that it's racist to use racial slurs all the time. I don't care what's in here, and there's obviously nothing up here if you think that's a valid defense. And by the way, when I say all the time, I do mean all the time. Like, here is a non-Content Cop video in which Ian is reacting to this guy who had launched a Kickstarter campaign.
Hi, my name is Jake and I'm a ginger Latino.
Why is that his opening line?
And then he goes on to compare this to not just the N-word, but the F slur as well?
Hi, my name's Ian, and I'm a I kinda said it like I was autistic, like I had Tourette's.
That is obviously racist, right? As well as homophobic. In fact, Ian strung those 2 words together that they pretty much just became his catchphrase that he would repeat in multiple videos over and over and over.
Just get a load at how perfectly the word is written in this letter.
And over. But why stop there when you could make fun of trans and disabled people as well?
I'm a wibbly wobbly transgendered queer autistic. Last semester I drowned my cat in a bathtub and I felt nothing.
iDubbbz tried so hard to create all of this pseudo-intellectual context for why he should be allowed to spread hateful content, but that wasn't enlightenment, that was just an excuse for someone whose idea of humor is to joke about raping starving black children. This is what can happen when you have literally no ability to relate to the idea of being marginalized, because society has always been centered around you. The whole idea of the margin itself and everyone on it becomes kind of just like a joke. So much of a joke, in fact, that going back to the Tana Content Cop, Ian went so far to get back at her as to attend one of her fan meetups just so he could be captured on camera saying the N-word in front of her, in public.
Say
And that, sitting at a cool 35 million views to this day, is the Tanamojo Content Cop. Now, if this is your first time hearing about the series, then I really hope the numbers paint the picture here. This wasn't just some fringe series living in a dark corner of the internet, right? These videos were all over YouTube. There are like 100 million views between just the 3 videos we looked at today. For better or worse, Content Cop is pretty much ingrained into YouTube history due to its timeliness and reach. People still reference it to this day. Heck, I even did a parody of it in one video a few years back. But for any positive impact that Content Cop had in furthering the commentary genre on YouTube, it's just really obvious how large the setbacks were as well when it comes to fostering a positive environment on this platform. The negative impact of Content Cop is pretty much impossible to measure due to the uncountable number of impressionable ears that were all too willing to accept Ian's busted mantra that slurs are the solution. And this harm has largely gone unaddressed by Ian because everyone kind of just moved on, I guess. Largely unaddressed, that is, until last week. 6 years after the Tana Content Cop, iDubbbz has decided to apologize. And personally, I think this might just be the most interesting apology I've ever reacted to.
For a while, I felt like if I changed my content over time, that people would see that as a reflection of who I am and what I value. But I'm starting to realize that that is a very weak and passive way to run my channel and live my life.
So in the years since Content Cop, Ian did in fact change his content. Like I said, the series only went from 2015 to 2017. And in the years since, he's tried his hand at a variety of content styles, but the incessant slurs and consistent disregard for anybody who seemed to get offended by them did pretty much dissipate over the years. But nevertheless, I do completely agree with Ian right here that just because he changed his content doesn't necessarily mean that we should automatically assume that's a reflection of his values. It would be really nice to assume that he changed his content because he no longer supports it, but the truth of the matter is YouTube no longer supports that either, so we're not really going to know the real reason unless he shares it with us, which I guess that's what he's here to do today.
If I'm gonna have the balls to go to Tana's fan meetup and say slurs at her and then make a video about how it's okay to say slurs, I think I should have the balls to make an apology video and take accountability for the mistakes I've made. So that's what this video is.
Okay, so at this point, I was actually pretty surprised. I find that oftentimes when people make these YouTuber apology videos, they tend to be really vague about what they're talking about. That way, on the off chance that you didn't know what they did, they're not the ones who let you know. But here Ian is in the very beginning of the video, just jumping straight into the point.
I am responsible for creating a lot of hurtful and damaging content on this channel. And I've also created a culture of apathy and I don't know, a lot of like cruelty as well.
Cruelty is definitely a strong word, but yeah, I think it applies here. Criticizing people is one thing, but telling them to kill themselves, mocking their appearance, purposely making them uncomfortable by saying slurs in front of them, all while ignoring the people telling you that your behavior is having a negative impact. Pretty much just the definition of cruel and apathetic, yeah.
I don't think they you know, some of these videos were edgy. I think they were just outright cruel. I have made some cruel, hurtful content and I need to acknowledge that, and I'm really sorry that it's taken me this long to acknowledge it.
So personally, this is where I really started to appreciate this apology. So many people at the time hid behind the word edginess as just like an excuse for being legitimately terrible to people. In fact, if you want to talk about words that lost their power over time due to overuse, look no further than edgy. So the fact that he does make a clear distinction between edginess, which is perfectly fine, and harmful content, which is what his content was, at the very least, it seems like he's ready to be honest.
The content I'm talking about specifically are Content Cop videos and videos where I was just generally criticizing people for very lackluster reasons.
Now, my first reaction was, hey, the people in Content Cop did deserve to be criticized. But then the more I thought about it, the more I realized he was right. Like, yes, obviously, calling someone out for bullying kids is the right thing to do, but Ian himself said at the time that he didn't actually think bullying was bad. In fact, his main problem was just that Leafy was insecure while bullying other people. Similarly, Tanamojo using the N-word is obviously wrong, and anybody is well within their right to call that out. But then you think once again about how Ian at the time said he didn't care about the N-word either, and that he was really just doing it in retaliation to her hypocrisy. And you know what? These are honestly pretty lackluster reasons reasons to criticize people. He wound up being on the right side of all of those arguments in retrospect. I do want to make that very clear. But by his own admission, he kind of got there because it happened to align with his goals more so than it was the right thing to do.
It's also indoctrinated a lot of people into thinking that this is an okay way to behave, and it's not. It's super irresponsible and
This is another part of the apology that I think was done really well. A direct call out to anyone who's using Ian's content or justifications as an excuse to do the same things he was doing.
Now, something like this would have been a lot more useful about 6 years ago, but you know what? I'll take what I can get, broski.
I was being very bigoted in a lot of my videos, and I justified it because I didn't think it was too serious. And I thought that people were going to see that I had good intentions, but that's so silly. Casual racism is still racism. Casual bigotry is still bigotry.
It must be nice to not think that bigotry is like that serious. Like to even be able to think that. Unfortunately, it winds up having really one-sided consequences for people who don't have the privilege of thinking of it as being anything other than serious. And in that same vein, I would kind of suggest the idea that there's actually no such thing as casual racism either, because like, it's never casual. But I definitely do understand it's a useful term for denoting racism that is not done with malice or the intent to harm people. And so it's good that Ian does see that all of it is wrong regardless.
It doesn't matter what my intentions are. Like if I'm hurting people, I'm hurting people. Who the f knows what my intentions are? Like sarcasm and jokiness and jokey tone only goes so far, especially over the internet. Even in real life, that's like an impossible thing to know with 100% certainty.
He's definitely come a long way from getting mad at Tana for calling him racist for being racist. If you are having the exact same impact as a bigot, then truly, what difference do your intentions make in the first place? I'm really glad that he's no longer fueling that stupid guessing game that people try to rope you in with when they don't really want to acknowledge that what they're doing is racist.
I am absolutely responsible for my audience. I've clearly done a lot of damage. These videos have been up for a long time and have accumulated millions of views. I shouldn't be able to just make an apology video and walk away from it. This is something that I should live the rest of my life with.
Interesting that he brings that up. So you may have noticed that I have personally been very receptive to this apology so far. But to iDubbbz's point, one 17-minute apology video is not really gonna undo years of damage. And like, whereas I so far totally accept the apology or what I've seen of it, you are so well within your right, if you are a person who is affected by his actions, to not want to accept his apology for any reasons that you may have. But anyway, since actions do speak louder than words, Ian details some actions that he's planning to take.
I am running ads on this video, and any revenue generated from this video, I'm going to match and donate to an organization that would have been particularly affected by the type of rhetoric that I've been spewing on this channel.
He also explains that he'll be unlisting Content Cop, which means the videos will still exist online, but they can't be promoted by the algorithm in any way. I personally really appreciated that because it would have been a lot harder for me to do the Content Cop review with you earlier if Ian had just nuked it from the web. And that's also kind of why I believe deleting things that are bad is not actually always the answer, so I support it.
For anyone who liked those videos, I want this video to be an example and a lesson for you. You can like content, but you can also think that it's irresponsible and it's hurting other people.
I think there are a lot of people who like Content Cop because of the genuinely good points, or the parts that were actually funny, right? Or just the chaos that ensued every time he uploaded one of these videos and someone's career fell apart in real time. And honestly, there is truly nothing wrong with liking content that also happens to have problematic aspects, as long as you're aware of them and that others may have different opinions due to those aspects. But like, this is crazy though, because I don't think I've ever listened to a YouTuber apology and been like, yeah, that sounds right. Like, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop and for him to just say some out-of-pocket stuff, but so far, he's kind of been on point.
I'm sorry to everyone that I made Content Cop videos on. I still don't like the majority of you, and that's fine, but I can recognize that you did not deserve the hate and harassment that I sent your way.
Sorry, but I still don't like y'all. It's kind of a baller move to make after 6 years. That was low-key fire. But yeah, jokes aside, I totally get apologizing for telling people to, you know, or like making fun of their face to strangers on the street. These kinds of things absolutely did influence the tone and content of the quote unquote criticism that his fan base would give to these people, which often wound up having nothing to do with their actual actions that should have been criticized.
I particularly want to apologize to Tana. Tana, I'm sorry. I should have never made that video. I harassed Tana in person and then harassed her online, and that's deplorable behavior.
Escalating any sort of online beef into an in-person confrontation is just so unhinged, and in retrospect, it's actually pretty weird that everybody was celebrating that at the time. But you know what, that was like the height of epically owning or like debating anybody who disagreed with you on literally anything, so dark times.
I'm also sorry to all the black viewers and minority groups who had to put up with that video and put up with the phrases. I said either it's all okay or none of it's okay. And that's just so dangerous and stupid.
Oh hey, I'm in this apology. You know what, iDubbbz, let's do this. I accept the apology. On behalf of myself and only me, I am just one person. Here's why it's working for me, right? Because so far, he's acknowledged what he's done wrong, why it was wrong, the impact that his wrongdoing had, the actions that he's taking to just sort of undo some of that impact, and he's doing all of this while realizing that none of it can actually force anyone to forgive him. I feel like I have a much clearer understanding of what his stances are now, and I personally believe that if he wasn't being genuine, it would be kind of hard for him to hit all of those talking points without missing a beat. So I personally see this as like a really good example of just growing as a person.
Anyone who thinks that I should be shouting the N-word from the rooftops, I don't want to be your cup of tea.
There are, without a doubt, racist people in iDubbbz's audience to this day, because that's just what happens when you consistently foster the kind of environment that he did. But at this point, he's explicitly letting them know that they're not even a consideration anymore. Like, they're not gonna like this one, but who would want them to, honestly? Anyway, Ian then pivots into talking about some of the experiences that sort of caused him to do the self-reflection that got him to this point in the first place, starting with a fan meetup.
This particular fan came up to me and said, I know you probably don't like transgender people, but can I, get a picture? That smacked me in the face. I was like, oh, holy shit. Why would you think that? But I mean, it was fairly obvious.
I think coming face to face with the results of your own actions in a public setting should happen to everyone at least once. It builds character. Another thing iDubbbz brings up is his fans' horrible and misogynistic treatment of his wife, Anissa.
I don't think I've still fully acknowledged how responsible I am for the amount of harassment that Anissa has had to deal with.
Turns out the mentality that iDubbbz had built up in his audience was a great recipe for misogyny, because there is a very vocal portion of his fans that tried to blame Anissa for quote unquote ruining Ian and turning him soft. Literally like how people try to blame Yoko Ono for the Beatles breaking up, because anything bad that has ever happened must be because of a woman. Shout out Adam and Eve. In fact, speaking of some of his horrible fans, they were actually the most direct reason that caused Ian to confront a lot of stuff he had previously neglected.
It was my realization upon meeting more and more fans that I was like, oh, you guys are struggling. It was easy for me to identify them struggling when they were outside of my body, but the antisocial basement dwelling incel that was inside here, I couldn't acknowledge that. I couldn't recognize that. So I needed the mirror to be held up to me.
Obviously, not all iDubbbz fans are basement dwelling incels, but honestly, the ones that are not seem to be aware of that, and they don't really seem that bothered. There is actually a pretty great outpouring of support on this video right now. Though, of course, there is also a very vocal portion of his audience that is not appreciative of his new changes at all, and I wonder why.
It sounds really pathetic to say at the age of 32 I've acquired empathy, but I have, and I've realized it because I just can't help myself but feel for other people's pain and suffering now.
I think this just comes down to a fundamental difference in how people approach things that don't affect them. When someone brings something to you that you have never personally experienced, you could either just reject it outright, or you could attempt to see it from their point of view. I think that realizing that things can be and are real for other people without you ever having to see or experience them is actually just a huge part of being an accepting and genuinely decent-ish person. I don't know. It's what I try to do, at least.
I just want you guys to know that you can unlock ability empathy if you experience more life. It might take you getting hurt a little bit, but it's worth it. It is so worth it.
And with that, iDubbbz closes out what is, to be honest, in my opinion, one of the best apology videos on YouTube. I know that's not saying much. You are gonna clown. No, hold on. At this point, I too would be impressed with even the bare minimum, okay? But this feels like more than that to me. It's not just sorry. It's like a look at his current perspective from every single angle, but without making a single excuse. Now, of course, many people were chiming in on this, which I think only makes sense since one of the most prominently problematic people in 2016 just very publicly disavowed his older content. And I think a lot of these responses were perfectly fine. But then came one response that left me so baffled, so blindsided that it's actually the reason I'm here making this video today.
I kind of want to go over this whole situation because I have a lot of thoughts on the topic, not only as it pertains to iDubbbz in particular, but just in the general creator space.
So for those of you who don't know, that was Charlie, aka Moist Critical on Twitch or Penguin Zero right here on YouTube. A man of many names, a man of many videos. I've watched a lot of Charlie's videos. A lot of people have watched a lot of Charlie's videos. In fact, there is a pretty big chance that many of you here fall into that category. If you don't, I'll give you a quick rundown. Charlie's pretty much one of the biggest commentators on the platform. The main reason I watch him is because I find that generally he offers pretty reasonable takes on pretty much everything in a very down-to-earth way. Even when I don't agree with him, which definitely does happen from time to time, I still always understand why he holds a certain opinion because he genuinely does a great job of explaining sort of where he's at with things. So I guess when you look at it that way, a video that misses the mark this hard is definitely sure to stick out like a sore thumb in a catalog of mostly reasonable content. Because that's exactly what happened when Charlie decided to weigh in with the following video response to iDubbbz's apology.
I'm sorry to immediately come in here with the Phoenix Wright objection, but I completely disagree with the sentiment that it's weak or passive to change your content and expect people to see that as a reflection of yourself. By changing the content over time, you're changing the audience over time as well, obviously, right? You can just make different stuff and go in that direction where you're happier without ever really needing to come forward and really lecture on why.
So right off the bat, Charlie's coming in and disagreeing with Ian's personal feelings about how he was running his channel and living his life, I guess. But even at that doesn't really make any sense, right? Like what Charlie is describing is definitely logical, but I would say it applies more so to a change in content than a change in values. Even I've changed my content multiple times over the years, and no, I don't think that ever needed an explanation or anything like that. But Ian didn't go from like a car review channel to a movie review channel. The change he made is that he no longer wants to promote the normalization of racist and bigoted content. I definitely think that could use a lecture on why, so to speak.
He wasn't happy with the content he made or the person he was, and now he's trying to apologize for the videos he made. And I, once again, have to completely disagree with the way he looks at it. I feel like his perspective on it is very warped by the way the internet has evolved over the years. The way he talks about this content makes it sound like he used to murder puppies for these videos, which it was never that extreme.
So this part is low-key crazy to me because did we watch the same video? Ian was so very clear about what he was apologizing for, like right in the beginning, which was saying slurs and telling people that it's okay to say slurs. Moreover, in many ways, what iDubbbz did was pretty extreme, but at the same time, I don't think he was making it sound like he was murdering puppies or anything like that. That's such a weird way to present Ian's statements, and so early on in the video too.
I very much would consider it edgy. It was 2016 edginess in all of its glory. That was entirely the brand. And for its time, it lived peacefully. You know, all four nations, water, earth, fire, air, lived together in harmony with all of this edginess going on.
All right, now this is where Charlie started to lose me. It's absolutely tragic that Ian went out of his way to specifically indicate that his content was not just edgy, it was harmful, only for Charlie to swoop back in and say, nope, actually, it was just edgy. To imply that we were peacefully living in harmony with all of the edginess is to just completely ignore all of the people who were speaking out against this weird normalized culture. In 2016, that might have just seemed like the brand if you were fortunate enough to be unaffected by it. But in my experience, it felt more like the plague. And I know that I am not the only one who feels that way about that time period. Like slurs, racism, homophobia, these things are not edgy. They are wrong, which is like literally the point of iDubbbz's apology.
In your 30s, it's not exactly entertaining to just be spamming slurs for shock humor. I don't find that entertaining, and he doesn't either, so it's totally fine to want to distance yourself from making content like that, but I don't think it was a mistake that he made those videos. Like, they're not hurtful, nor do I really think they're damaging.
Okay, now I know we're not talking about the same video. iDubbbz literally encouraged people to say the N-word with a hard R. How is that anything other than harmful content? This was a talking point, an extended talking point in a video that has 30 million views now. Now, it might not be harmful or damaging to Charlie because, you know, he would obviously be unaffected by words like that, but surely Charlie doesn't think iDubbbz was actually apologizing to him, right?
At the end of the day, I don't think the goal of his content was ever to be hurtful or damaging. He was just trying to entertain and using edginess as shock humor, which for its time was acceptable online. Now, whether or not you think that's okay that it was ever acceptable, that's a different argument for a different day, but the point is, the point of his content wasn't to be hateful.
It's not a different argument for a different day, Charlie. It's the argument. Now, it is the argument. It's what we're talking about. Like, this is sort of the point, that this was never at any point really acceptable. It was just prevalent. The reason it went unchecked, which might be a good word for it, is that the people who were being affected by this did not have the same platform to speak up against the people who were normalizing this sort of harmful behavior. But though it was more frequent, I really hope we don't get it twisted. This was not acceptable. These words were still called slurs. People were shocked by them, hence the term that you keep using.
I just don't think that the apology is really warranted. You can explain, like, I just don't like making that content anymore, so I won't. I even regret making that content because it's kind of cringe now. But to think that it is this huge, massive problem, like you made an unforgivable mistake, is a little weird to me.
This is the part where I was like, hold on. You really just heard iDubbbz say, I apologize to black people for being racist, and then you got on your channel and said, I don't think the apology was warranted? Broski. He also apologized to Tana Mojo and other subjects of his content cops as well, but like nowhere in this apology was anything directed towards anyone like Charlie. How are you going to reject an apology to me before I have time to accept it? Like, what is happening right now?
You shouldn't have to apologize for criticizing someone or something. Voicing your opinion on a subject is a totally natural thing to do, and to try and vilify the idea of criticism being evil, I think is a little dangerous, because then you just create these echo chambers and no one ever really grows from that. I think it's totally fine if you regret the way you criticize things, the way you approach the subjects. If you regret how you handled it, that's okay. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that you were picking apart people for lackluster things. Whether you like it or not, you did make good points and good arguments against people who did deserve criticism.
I totally agree that you should not have to apologize for criticizing things. I would surely hope so, or I have a lot of apologies to do. But like, that being said, nobody was saying that though. Like, yeah, it's dangerous to insinuate that, but who insinuated it? iDubbbz is not vilifying the act of criticism itself. He is very obviously doing the thing you said of like regretting the way you went about it and how you handled the subjects. Why are we so intent on proving that iDubbbz didn't need to apologize when the apology was for racism? Like, why is this even a video? Why is anything at all ever?
You can of course still say that it's unacceptable that he was using slurs for shock humor. That's a totally fair perspective to have, but it's still, I think, a little ridiculous to make it seem like it was this big of a deal that it warranted a whole apology video in which he makes it seem like he'll never truly find forgiveness and he'll never forgive himself.
I'm really glad that Charlie thinks it's a totally fair perspective, that I think being racist and calling it humor is not acceptable. And again, with this unwarranted apology, listen, iDubbbz used a lot of slurs in his videos, dude. Like, ones I've never even heard of and I probably need to just scrub from my brain. But despite that, I don't feel like even a single one of them was directed at any groups that Charlie is in any way. Like, of course you don't see this as a big deal, but if iDubbbz is making it seem like such a big deal, and you do know that these words affect real groups of people, then like, you could do the math and figure out that to real groups of people, this might be a big deal, right?
Now, I have no doubt that his audience did cultivate some weirdo losers that probably were real racists somewhere in there that didn't really care about his message and just liked that he was saying the N-word. But I don't think that was his goal, and there's always going to be weirdo losers.
His message was literally use the N-word though. Like yes, content cop, fun series, many points. That was not the only message, and I am not trying to make it sound like that. But again, like, there's always going to be weirdo losers. If by weirdo losers you mean racists who agree with you that it's okay to say the N-word, that's only going to happen if you tell people it's okay to say the N-word, Charlie. I promise you, this is not a situation that your average creator would be in. I do think this is exceptional enough to warrant an apology.
The vilifying of your own audience in your previous content, I don't think is the right way of even looking at the content you used to make or the audience that you had. Of course, there were bad actors in there, but not everyone was. And to make them feel like they were if they liked your content is a little weird. And I don't think that's the goal of this video by any means, but it does come across that way.
Okay, but hold up. How is he vilifying people who like Content Cop if he says in the video, it's okay to like Content Cop as long as you understand that parts of it were irresponsible? I feel like we are putting words in mouths at this point. Now, if we are referring to the basement dwelling energy that iDubbbz was referring to, I don't feel like he has to follow that up each time with, but not all of you guys. Either he's talking about you or he's not, and you know. I watched Content Cop, and when he said basement dwelling incel, I didn't even move. I know he's not talking about me. He better not be.
You didn't create a army of racists and bigots. The content itself isn't bigoted content either. You used edgy shock humor, and I don't think that makes you a bigot that you're going to have to atone for those sins for the rest of your life over.
I can't even overstate how counterproductive it is to listen to a person genuinely apologize for being bigoted and then come on your channel with 13 million subscribers and say, no, actually, you weren't being bigoted. We've made just a modicum of progress since 2016. But even that, you have to come back and remind us that actually it can all be waved away in a single word, therefore no apology is warranted. What is happening? Next, Charlie mentions iDubbbz's donation, but not without letting us know that he didn't think it was necessary.
Anything charitable, I'm always for. Though I don't think it was necessary or anything, I still think that's a nice gesture regardless. But he uses the word rhetoric here. And that again makes it sound like these videos were coming from like a legitimate racist, which I don't think they were. I really don't. At least I don't want to believe that iDubbbz used to be a racist and he was using that to try and propel his beliefs forward.
I'm really glad Charlie let us know that he didn't think it was necessary for iDubbbz to donate to charity. That was a really solid addition to what is already a very strange video. But anyway, notice how Charlie is doing the exact thing that Ian mentioned in his video, aka struggling to say without a doubt that Ian wasn't racist because we don't know his intentions. That is literally the point of the apology. Not that Ian is some crazy racist, but that he was behaving in a way indistinguishable from one and therefore wound up contributing widespread to the normalization of racism. I didn't even realize that this point could be missed, let alone missed this entirely.
He tells a couple anecdotes about going to conventions and meeting fans and it being kind of like this mirror held up to him that he didn't like the reflection of.
So this is the weird part. Up until this point in Charlie's video, he had been showing clips from iDubbbz, the same clips that we watched, and he was responding to them, so he could debunk each one by telling iDubbbz that his feelings were wrong. But when it came to this part of the video, Charlie literally just stopped inserting clips. So in this version of iDubbbz's apology, we don't actually hear anything about the one trans fan. We don't hear anything about the harassment his wife was receiving. My point is, we don't hear any of Ian's multiple and detailed reasons for why he felt the need to apologize. All we hear is just Charlie telling him that he should not feel the need to apologize.
Even though I disagree with iDubbbz's perspective on his older content being damaging or dangerous or indoctrinating, I still do respect that he didn't like what he was doing, so now he's doing something that he likes more. Even though it is coming at the risk of losing his audience, he'll find happiness in the content that he makes going forward, and maybe he's happier with the new audience that he potentially cultivates through all of it.
So yeah, that was Charlie's first video on the iDubbbz situation, which actually currently has more views than iDubbbz's actual apology, meaning that for many people, Charlie was the first and last word on the situation. Despite Charlie's misrepresentation of iDubbbz's position, his minimization of the harmful effects that iDubbbz's content had, and his bizarre insistence to reject an apology that was not offered to him. Bruh. Now, because these issues stood out to not just me, but like a ton of people, the comment section was not having it. There was just comment after comment of people explaining that actually iDubbbz's content was harmful. Here's how. Actually, I really did appreciate the apology. Here's why. Actually, it's really weird to tone police someone's apology. What are you doing? We can't read all of them, but you can definitely check them out, and we'll just read mine because I think I left one that kind of sums up the general sentiment pretty well. People at the time were literally citing iDubbbz videos as a source for why they were justified in using slurs. This made the internet a very disconcerting place. As someone who definitely did see the harm Ian was referring to firsthand, I also think personal growth is pretty amazing. I appreciated his apology quite a bit, but that's just me. And many of the top comments are in that same vein, to the point where ignoring them would have been pretty much impossible. Therefore, Charlie decided to respond the very same day, a few hours later, in a video called Huge L Take.
People have done some very uncharitable interpretations of what I've been saying, and I guess I can't really blame them. If I'm not abundantly clear with where I stand on things, I've learned that everything gets lost with ambiguity, and people run with the absolute most negative narrative they can find and the wildest ways to misconstrue some statements.
Kind of like what you did with Ian's video, but the craziest part was, like, I didn't misinterpret or misconstrue anything from Charlie's first video. And I'm not saying that, like, I have perfect comprehension. What I mean is every single clarification that Charlie made in his second video was in line with how I interpreted the first video. And honestly, I didn't really see people misinterpreting him in the top comments of the first video personally, but then that's when it hit me. He's probably not even responding to YouTube comments. He's probably responding to Twitter.
By far the biggest thing I'm seeing from the online discussion around my video is people saying that I was attacking iDubbbz for trying to grow.
I didn't really see that take among Charlie's top YouTube comments. I'm sure it really was on Twitter, so I can't speak to that because I wasn't on there, and I'm glad that I was not. He does, however, address some of the things that did come up frequently in the YouTube comment section, like people taking issue with his sort of assertion that iDubbbz's apology was not warranted.
When I'm saying I don't think the apology was warranted, I'm saying I don't think him being a product of edgy internet culture is necessarily something that should have been weighing on his mind so heavily for the last 7 years that he's lived with this constant guilt, this burden on his shoulders where he's feeling as though he created edgy internet culture.
When iDubbbz said that he created a culture of cruelty and apathy, y'all know he didn't mean like he created racism in 2016, right? As he explained in his video in great detail, he created a culture within his audience that facilitated the issues that happened in 2016. He was just apologizing for being a part of it. Doing something wrong, like what he did, and then feeling guilt over it because you chose not to speak up for 7 years, I feel like it's kind of understandable.
After listening to what people have said since I posted my video and diving a bit more into like the actual discussion in general online, I failed to really understand that maybe iDubbbz also treated this video like a diary where he just wanted to get everything off his chest with how he feels about it. So I completely misunderstood what the motivation could have been for this video, and for that, I'm sorry.
Here's the thing, and this is probably the point I'm gonna be the harshest about, sorry, but no matter how you interpreted iDubbbz's original reasoning for posting that apology, no matter how you look at it, that apology was not intended for you. You've taken a situation that is really important to a lot of people, and you have centered it around yourself and your opinion. And I know that might sound really similar to what commentary is all the time, but it's really different in this specific case because in doing so, you're invalidating the experiences of others by downplaying the severity of what they said they went through. And you're doing so on a platform that is so large, it will completely drown out any conversation from the people who are actually affected by this. iDubbbz's apology was about how he grew out of bigotry, and it was directed towards the people his bigotry affected. But who are we talking about now? All of a sudden, we're talking about Charlie. You see what happened there? I am not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that Charlie did not have a right to speak on the situation at all, because honestly, a lot of people did speak on the situation, and interestingly enough, they didn't face anywhere near as much backlash as Charlie did. So that's not the issue. I am instead just suggesting a more decentered approach when it comes to talking about things that didn't actually affect you. That way, you can still sort of get your opinions out there, but it doesn't come across as talking over other people. I really think that would have resonated a lot more strongly with the people watching, definitely me, because like at this point, even in this follow-up video, Charlie is still doubling down on the whole it's just edgy type beat.
I still do believe that iDubbbz was never a bad person for the content cops he made. That edgy shock humor was very much a 2016 trend. That whole era with slurs being used willy-nilly for cheap shock humor was not uncommon on the internet.
Now, far be it from me to only pick out the negative things in this follow-up video. One thing I really appreciated in this video is that Charlie reconsidered his stance that iDubbbz's content did not lead to indoctrination.
I do believe it is possible that he did have a very negative effect on how a lot of the youth perceived slurs and maybe the willingness to use them. That is possible, and I'm sorry that I didn't consider that angle. I failed to realize that I was still pretty f***ing old when the content cops were, you know, hitting the cyberspace.
I would say it's more than possible, but I'll take possible. I'll take possible. He also addresses the missing fan interaction story that a lot of people, myself included, thought would have added quite a bit more context to his video and maybe even refuted a few of his points.
He mentions fan interaction where he met a couple fans and it helped him understand that, damn, my content is really giving people a certain vibe or a certain impression of me that just isn't true. And I didn't exclude them from my video as a way of like manipulating a narrative or trying to hide it or anything. They weren't part of like the overall talking point that I was trying to discuss.
This is the one part that I still don't understand personally, because it really does seem like, from my perspective, you took a video, iDubbbz's apology, you made a video saying that he didn't need to apologize, and then you just cut out the part where he explained why actually, yes, he did need to apologize. I don't know how Ian saying, here are some things that led to my change, would not be considered part of your overall talking point. But at this point, I guess we're just interpreting it differently, which is literally bound to happen. Charlie once again makes it really clear that he has sort of revised his stance on indoctrination, and once again, I appreciate it.
I didn't even take into consideration that a lot of the viewers were younger, and there's a very good chance that this content was their first exposure to it, and it may have led to them becoming those weirdo losers, which is something iDubbbz would obviously want to distance himself from.
It definitely shows that he wasn't just getting like offended at the comments, which I think is good. I don't know that I've ever really seen him do that, but yeah, that's pretty much Charlie's second video.
I was never attacking iDubbbz for apologizing for regretting his content or for wanting to change and grow and do different things. I really thought I voiced support for those things, but I must not have done it effectively. So that's on me, and hopefully this gave all of my perspectives on it much more clarity.
Whereas I think the first one is still terrible. That video is not it. I did gain more understanding of where he was coming from in the second video. I still think he missed the point though. However, I do want to make one thing really, really abundantly clear. I don't think that this was some sort of like dark plan by Charlie to purposely mislead or misconstrue anything. I honestly just think he makes so many videos, dude. The man has uploaded like 12 or 13 videos since this iDubbbz situation, and it literally happened like barely a week ago. All this to say, there's no way this could have been some dark plan, because I don't even think Charlie plans out his videos that hard. And usually that is actually really a benefit to the content. That's pretty much why I enjoy watching him. He's like one of the few people on the platform who doesn't have to write a really long script just to be coherent. And I usually think that really highlights Charlie's best qualities. But in a situation that definitely did involve more nuance than he gave it, I think it backfired on him, and that's sort of just, it happens. Anyway, I'm gonna leave you with this tweet from iDubbbz, which was very interestingly posted like one day after Charlie's 2 videos. I welcome opinions about my apology from people and communities whom the apologies were directed at. That is where my care starts and ends. And you know what? That's good enough for me. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for watching if you happen to make it this far, and I cannot wait to see you in the next one. All right, that's about it. See ya.